The mid-2000s in Formula One came with the amount of drama one might expect from a sport that involves 20 men hurling a car around a track at 200 miles per hour. However, what you might not expect is the blatant cheating that played out in front of the viewer's eyes. From Michael Schumacher suspiciously running wide and parking his car at the exit of Rasclass to ensure pole position at Monaco in 2006, to McLaren's Spygate ordeal in 2007, it seemed every season couldn't escape a scandal involving Formula One's top teams. One of these teams was French constructors Renault, who secured back-to-back championships in 2005 and 2006, and seemingly weren't willing to get drawn into the messy paddock politics going on around them. However, after a disappointing 2007 campaign and a winless first half of 2008, how would the French garage and star-studded duo of Fernando Alonso and Nelson Piquet Jr. react?
If you found out that you'd won a race because it was manufactured by a team, would you be happy with that?
As the team said, we will not comment anything until everything finished, so we'll see after.
Anyone familiar with Fernando Alonso knows the Spaniard's appetite for winning. In 2007, rumors in the paddock swirled that he had secretly paid McLaren mechanics not to work on Lewis Hamilton's car in an attempt to keep the talented rookie at bay. If he pulled tricks like that whilst he was winning, what would he possibly be willing to do after a winless start to 2008? Dan Ripley famously stated that what followed was a sports entertainment script that not even Vince McMahon nor his team of writers in the WWE could have dreamed up. Well, heading into the Singapore Grand Prix, Fernando Alonso started 15th on the grid, following a mechanical issue in Q2. And despite a fully functioning car, his teammate Nelson Piquet Jr. one-upped Alonso's qualifying disappointment with a Q1 exit. How could the two Renaults rescue a good points haul, let alone think about winning the Grand Prix? There was near disaster before the race had even started, as Piquet spun on the formation lap, narrowly avoiding the wall at turn 17. Following this moment, the race started without anything too out of the ordinary before Fernando Alonso was the first driver to dive into the pits on lap 12. Before anyone else could respond to Renault's early quarter box, there was a major incident at turn 17. It was Nelson Piquet Jr. in the exact spot he had spun during the formation lap. Only this time it played right into Renault's hands. But how could one of their drivers crashing out in dramatic fashion possibly work in their favor? Well, when Nelson Piquet Jr. inconspicuously lost control of his car at the 2008 Singapore Grand Prix, he caused a safety car, and when the pit lane opened, all the frontrunners dove into the pit lane to change their tires. Those who did pit under the safety car, which of course was illegal in the 2008 rulebook, had to serve a stop-go penalty. His teammate Alonso, who had also pitted for a new set of tires, was handed the lead of the race, which caused many viewers to raise an eyebrow. Surely it was too big of a stunt to be orchestrated. The only thing that could have saved Alonso's race after his strange early pit stop was his safety car. And the small fact that Alonso eventually went on to win the race only fueled more conspiracies surrounding Piquet's troubles with turn 17. Without a win all season, and perhaps still red-faced from losing to a 22-year-old rookie teammate the previous season, it seems Fernando Alonso's damaged ego was in control of Renault's strategy in Singapore. If you combine this with Renault team principal Flavio Briatore's contentious past of fraud convictions dating back to the 1980s, perhaps Renault were lucky to escape the Singapore Grand Prix without a formal investigation, or at least a few fingers being pointed in their direction. Rumors at the time were that Renault had threatened to pull out of Formula One entirely if the team didn't win a race in 2008. And what happened at Singapore was certainly one way to do it if they could pull off the stunt undetected. Fast forward to August 2009, and Renault had seemingly been deemed innocent. The incident had not been investigated, and it all appeared to be one big coincidence. So how did Crashgate manage to become public knowledge?
The FIA World Council will meet on Monday week to consider the evidence and come to a judgment. Piquet's sworn statement, a key part of the prosecution case, was leaked to the media this weekend.
By August 2009, Piquet Jr. had failed to score any points in 10 races, whilst his teammate Alonso had managed 13, and he was subsequently dropped by the French outfit in the middle of the season. The departure was acrimonious, with Piquet criticizing both the team and Renault team principal Flavio Briatore, who had masterminded Crashgate. The decision to cut Piquet Jr. was turning out to be one Briatore would live to regret, as Briatore's master plan in Singapore soon became public knowledge. On the 30th of August 2009, reports by the Brazilian television station Rede Globo stated that Nelson Piquet Jr. was ordered to crash during the Singapore race, and so Formula One's governing body, the FIA, immediately announced it was investigating the alleged incident. The team was called to a meeting of the FIA World Motorsport Council in Paris on the 21st of September, days before the 2009 running of the Singapore Grand Prix, and the situation seemed to be coming full circle for Renault. In a transcript published by the F1 Supporters Association, Piquet stated that he was asked by Briatore to crash his car at turn 17. Alonso denied knowing of any plan to ask Piquet to crash, stating, "I cannot imagine these things, these situations. It's something that never entered my mind." Piquet clapped back at his former teammate, citing that in his place, he would have questioned Renault's senseless race strategy of starting with a low fuel load and making an early pit stop on the 12th lap. Although Piquet Jr. made little impact whilst racing in Formula One, he certainly didn't leave without making his mark. But much like the Spaniard's crafty maneuvers that had kept him out of trouble on the racetrack, Alonso also managed to stay out of trouble off the track as well, as the FIA absolved him of any blame for the incident, now known as Crashgate. But with the evidence now stacking up against them and motorsport's highest court investigating the issue, surely Renault could only sit back and accept the consequences? Well, we saw the lengths they went to in order to win on the track at Singapore in 2008, and they embraced the same spirit off of it. On the 11th of September, the day after Piquet's statement to the FIA was leaked, Renault F1 stated that it intended to take legal action against Piquet and his father in both French and British courts, stating that, "Today, the ING Renault F1 team and its managing director, Flavio Briatore, personally wish to state they have commenced criminal proceedings against Nelson Piquet Jr. and Nelson Piquet Sr. in France concerning the making of false allegations." To say the relationship between Renault and Piquet Jr. had turned slightly frosty would be an understatement. This desperate attempt to turn the tables lasted less than a couple of weeks, as Renault announced it would not be contesting the charges at the meeting of the FIA World Motorsport Council in Paris on the 21st of September, and stated that both Briatore and Simons had left the team. After the hearing in Paris, Briatore was banned indefinitely from any FIA-sanctioned event, while Simons received a 5-year ban. Furthermore, Briatore was indefinitely banned from managing drivers as the FIA stated that super licenses would not be issued or renewed to any driver associated with him in the future. The council came down particularly hard on Briatore because he denied his involvement despite overwhelming evidence. It very much seemed he hadn't learned any lessons from his run-in with the Italian legal system in the 1980s. Briatore's former colleagues abandoned any emotional connection or loyalty to the disgraced Italian, with Renault CEO Patrick Pilati stating he did not wish the actions of Briatore and Simons to reflect upon the whole company and the entire Formula One team. The fallout and backlash from the Formula One community was both unprecedented and also completely understandable. But what about those reporting from outside the paddock and court proceedings? Well, they seem to have even less sympathy for the revelations coming from Piquet and the World Motorsports Council meeting. Chief sports writer Simon Barnes of British newspaper The Times sparked a debate over the incident when he labelled it the worst single piece of cheating in the history of sports because of its potentially lethal consequences to Piquet, the other drivers, marshals, and spectators. Supporting Barnes, The Times motor racing correspondent Edward Gorman said Briatore and Simons had set in motion an event of violent destruction, the consequences of which they could neither predict nor control. In response to the scandal and its community-wide shaming, Renault's main sponsors ING and Musa Madrilena ended their sponsorship agreements with Renault, leaving their car looking rather boring for upcoming races, as logos were removed from the car's design. On the 19th of October 2009, Flavio Briatore announced his intentions to sue the FIA for his lifetime ban, claiming that the FIA had been used as a tool of vengeance on behalf of one man. If you have learned anything from this video, then Briatore's retaliation should not come as a surprise. However, what is more surprising is he was finally on the right side of the jury's decision. In January 2010, the French Tribunal de Grande Instance overturned his ban and awarded him €15,000 in compensation for his treatment during initial proceedings. This rare win for Briatore did little for his public image. Briatore stepped down from his role as director of English football club Queen's Park Rangers in February 2010 as a result, and has largely kept out of the public's gaze since. Neither Briatore nor Nelson Piquet Jr. have returned to Formula One since the facade, and Renault as a team have languished in the sport's midfield ever since. There is no doubt the actions of the team in Singapore in 2008 left long-lasting effects on everyone involved. So, for their sake, I hope the celebrations at night in Singapore were worth it.